Hello, my name is Lisbeth Tejera, and today we'll be talking about the SLO1, which is explaining the primary functions of the cellular membrane in maintaining cellular integrity and facilitating communication and transportation. To start, we're going to talk about the fluid mosaic model. So basically, when it comes to describing the cell membrane, we do it best with the fluid mosaic model, which is the picture you see above. At the center of it all, you'll see the phospholipid bilayer, which basically works like a selective barrier that lets some things in and out, but keeps the cell internal environment very well protected. Now, it's important to understand that this bilayer is not just lipid. You also find sprinkles of proteins, you'll find cholesterols, you'll find things like carbohydrates, and the proteins here, they act like little workers. So essentially here, some of them help with transportation molecules, some picks up signals. Then we have the cholesterol, which helps keep the membrane stable but still flexible. And the carbohydrates, they basically help cells recognize and talk to each other. So when we call it fluid, it's because these pieces essentially can move around, and mosaic is because all of these different parts come together like a patchwork. This setup essentially gives the membrane that perfect balance of structure as well as that flexibility that the cell essentially needs to survive. Okay, now we're going to be talking about maintaining cellular integrity. When it comes to the cell membrane, it plays a central role in maintaining cellular integrity. It forms a physical barrier that separates the internal environment of the cell from the outside of the cell, giving the cell control over its own conditions. It's also vital for homeostasis when the cell regulates the movements of ions and helps maintain pH levels and control water balance to prevent osmotic stress. These processes keep the internal environment stable so the cell's metabolic activities can continue effectively. The membrane also provides protections against external stress. It can resist mechanical forces such as pressure or stretching, and helps shield the cell from chemical damage. An important function that sometimes is overlooked is how the membrane is also able to anchor the cytoskeletons, as you can see in the image to the left. The cytoskeletons are essentially this internal network of protein filaments that gives the cell its structure. By attaching to the membrane, the cytoskeletons are able to stabilize the cell's shape and help organize the placement of the proteins within the membrane, and allows the cell to move and interact within the environment. It even plays a role in different things as like cell division, which we will get into so much in detail right now. Altogether, the membrane is not only able to protect and help stabilize the cell, but it can also coordinate with the cytoskeletons to support the cell's shape and its dynamic functions. Okay, now we're going to start talking about facilitating communication between cells. So when it comes to the cell membrane, it is essential for communication between the cell and its environment. Within the cell membrane, we'll have things called membrane proteins, which act as receptors for signaling molecules such as hormones, neurotransmitters, etc. When these molecules bind to receptors, they trigger specific cellular responses. These binding often activates this thing called signal transduction cascades, which are chains of molecular events within the cell that happens within the cell. These cascades basically regulate things like vital processes, including cell growth, differentiation, immune response, etc. In addition, the membrane also contains carbohydrate chains which attach to proteins and lipids. These serve as like the cell identity tags, which allow cells to recognize each other. This is important for immune recognition and the organization of tissues within different multicellular organisms. Through these mechanisms, the membrane ensures that the cells can detect, as well as signal, respond, and interact with their surroundings in a very coordinated and efficient way. Okay, now we'll be talking about facilitating transport between within the membrane. The cell membrane regulates transport through two main mechanisms. We have passive and active transport. So there's passive transport, which does not require energy. Diffusion allows molecules to move from high concentration to low concentration. Here we have osmosis, which refers to the movement of water. Facilitated diffusion uses transport protein to move larger and more charged molecules across the membrane. We also have active transport, which requires energy, which is ATP. This includes things like the ion pump, which moves ions against their gradients, as well as endocytes and exocytes, which brings material into or releases material out of the cell. These processes are possible because the membrane is selectively permeable. This property ensures that the cell takes in essential nutrients, removes waste products, as well as maintains the proper balance of ions and molecules within the cell. Overall, the transport across the membrane is tightly regulated and is very fundamental when it comes to the cell's survival and function. And overall function. Okay, to wrap this up, the cell membrane's function is essentially vital for the cell since it maintains things like the cell integrity as well as homeostasis, which facilitates communication, recognitions, regulates the transport of molecules and ions in and out of the cell. These roles are really fundamental for the survival and the proper signaling and the ability of the cell to adapt to changing conditions. Overall, when it comes to the understanding of the membrane, it is essential because it is very central to nearly every process that keeps the cell and ultimately the organism both functioning and alive.